Welcome to the Student Perspectives podcast, where we interview your favourite lecturers and faculty members to find out about their career paths and the options you have when you graduate.
Today we are joined by a business strategist, educator and leader whose career spans banking, entrepreneurship and education, from leading a €5 billion plus online bank to running his own consultancy and now shaping the future of Dublin Business School. He's an expert in career development, leadership and transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the DBS President, Tim Bicknell. Live audience clap.
Imaginary clap.
Thank you, guys. Oh my God, that sounded so cool. I didn't recognize myself there, so thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on.
My
we
pleasure.
try our best to have a cool intro.
Yeah.
Before we get into things, can you tell us a bit about what exactly you do here at DBS for those who don't know?
Yeah, so I'm the president of DBS and I have been for 12 months now. And I guess that's the CEO of the business, you know, and DBS is a business as well as a school, and we're part of the Kaplan Group. And so, you know, we manage it like a business, and we have targets to be achieved in terms of growth and profitability, and making sure that, you know, I think fundamentally one of the wonderful things about Kaplan is student at the very center of that, and making sure the student experience is strong. We're doing a lot of work and thinking about that right now. And also making sure we've got a really good community, that our staff and you know, everyone feels this is a good place to be and hang out and develop and grow themselves as well. So I guess those are the things that I really think about, you know, when I think about my job. And so 12 months as president and really enjoying it.
I think it's quite hard for a lot of students to grasp kind of your position, because, you know, they're just beginning as students. They don't really, they can't see that pathway all the way up to kind of where you are at this point.
Yeah.
But where did it start for you? I assume you were in the UK.
Yes, I was. I've been here 25 years now, but I started out.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved to Ireland in my late 20s, and I guess the accent hasn't fully changed. Paddy, will see if yours kind of completely changes. Maybe it is doing a bit, but but I've been here 25 years now. 25 years this year. And it started out, I went to university in the UK in Exeter, good university. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I studied economics and politics. And then, interestingly, because we're talking about careers today, my first job, I worked for a company called Arthur Andersen that's died since, but it was a really big accounting firm, and very famous one. And it died because it got into trouble with fraudulent behavior with a company called Enron. Not while I was there, it was nothing to do with me. But I stayed there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, make sure we get that in.
Cut that out.
And I stayed there nearly a year. And, you know, it was a really important experience for me, because I worked out pretty early that I'd taken the wrong choice, you know. It just wasn't me, you know, accounting. I've subsequently done lots of accounting kind of qualifications and study as part of my MBA, so it's nothing to do with not being comfortable with numbers. It just didn't feel right for me. It didn't feel soulful enough. It didn't feel enough about people and teams and building. And so I changed direction. I was living in the Midlands in the UK. I was working in Birmingham, and I decided to move into financial services, moved down to London, changed for my life, and worked in the city of London for a bank, NatWest, on a marketing graduate scheme, and spent 4 or 5 years there. And moved reasonably quickly, becoming a manager. It was the early stages of the internet, which was super cool, which has kind of been a theme throughout my career, I guess. And so it was still at the dial-up stage, guys. You won't remember that, the sound it used to make when you used to have to get on the internet, all this squeaking. But it was really exciting. It was a time of real innovation, a lot of change. It was clear that technology was going to be transformational in banking and beyond. And I was really lucky to get involved in that at the early stage of my career. Worked with some really cool people on some very exciting projects, digital cash, looking at how technology was going to impact, investment banking, retail access to investment products. And I loved it. And I worked with some people that, I really enjoyed. And it built at an early stage of my career just a massive enthusiasm for technology and business and the fun of it. And I think a lot of that was down to that experience and the people I worked with. I then decided that I wanted to go and work in consulting, worked for IBM for a number of years, worked abroad a lot. I worked in Turkey, I worked in Thailand, doing a lot of work around digital transformation, early stages of e-business, which was really cool. The consulting work was brilliant in that it kind of gave me kind of comfort in working with kind of quite complex things where there were no easy answers, and how you can start to construct solutions with teams. Really enjoyed that and loved that. And then I'd met my my wife now at very early stages, just when we were on the graduate training scheme in our early 20s, and an opportunity came up for her to move back to Ireland to take a job. So she took that, I came, and I did a full-time MBA at Smurfit Business School, which I loved. Really, really loved that. It was a great experience, met loads of friends, made a lot of friends on my own terms, one of whom I'm godparent to his kid, and he's godparent to my eldest son. So that was a great way of me setting up in Ireland. And again, I loved it. I was back to, there is a little bit of this, feeling that education is wasted on the young. I enjoyed my first degree, but I loved the MBA. And it really kind of underscored for me that I wanted to kind of continue to develop my career in business. After that, I worked for ESB for 5 or 6 years, ran some teams there in marketing, residential markets, was responsible for customer service, all the digital side of it. From that, I went back into banking, permanent TSB, where I headed up personal banking and all of the data analytics and digital side of it. And then I went into Rabba Direct as general manager, and I ran that for about 6 years. Then I went and ran my own business for 5 years, which I loved, had lots of clients, really exciting, quite different experience. And then I got the opportunity to apply for this job as president of DBS, and here I am 12 months later, enjoying myself and loving it. So lots going on.
Does it ever amaze you when you look back and think about how much has gone on in that time?
Yeah. It does, and it only makes sense when you look backwards at it, right? Because so much of that was, I knew I wanted to go on a journey of trying a lot of different things. I was always really curious. I really do love work and working with people and the excitement of it and the curiosity of it. So I knew I was ambitious in that sense. But it does surprise me when I look back, all the different twists and turns, and you remember a lot of the good stuff, but of course there was challenges, right? And the learning in that and learning about yourself. And I do remember, I actually think I said this to Andrew Collin-Trant, the kind of chair and my predecessor, that there was a stage when I did my MBA and I would have been like 27, 28 or something. And there was a careers class, module that we did. And I remember, and it was kind of literally back of an envelope, sketching out what I wanted to do. And it was, I wanted to work in a company. I wanted to have my own business, be a bit of an entrepreneur. Then I wanted to go into education. And so I was reflecting on that. And in some ways, that's what's happened. I think the only thing is the entrepreneur part was meant to be, like I'd become a gazillionaire or something. And that didn't quite work out. But, I have ended up in education, and that felt like that was very much me and very aligned for me and my own vision of what I wanted to do in terms of helping and supporting people to develop.
I'm really curious about your early life. So what kind of prompted you to take on economics and politics, and what was that decision like to change that? Because there may be some students right now who don't like the course and want to change it, or are struggling to pick something.
Yeah, and I totally get that. And it's really interesting. I've 4 kids, and the eldest 3 really are at that point when they're making decisions about higher education and what to do, and you can lean into them sometimes, and you kind of forget what it was like when you were that age yourself. And you do make decisions. Economics and politics was just, I was going to university in the kind of first half of the 90s, and it was a really interesting time where the kind of wall had fallen in Germany, and the USSR was crumbling, Clinton was president. It was a time of real excitement. I was fascinated by that. So political economy, and I had half an idea I'd like to be a journalist at that stage, and maybe still will, who knows, it's not fully over yet. So I really enjoyed that. But that was the, I was just fascinated by what was going on in the world. It was a time of real change. It feels like a crazy time right now, of course, but perhaps not as driven by the idea of positive change. But of course, the world will continue to turn. But I was always incredibly curious about what was going on around the world, and political economy remains an area of fascination. And actually, before I started as president here, I did some teaching on the MBA, and it was all around, kind of global issues and from a business and strategy point of view. And so it took me back to that, and talking about what was happening in Ukraine, talking about what's happening with China, Taiwan. I was still fascinated.
And what was the decision like to change? Because that can be quite scary, I imagine, to change direction that fast.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of key things around change. The big decision was when I kind of started out in the accounting route to insolvency, and I changed after a year. And I remember at the time, it was okay because I was quite clear that I wanted to go in a different direction. But, changing direction, you have to be ready to consider that at any stage, right? I mean, whatever people are kind of studying here, you're not setting your stall out for that for the next kind of several decades. Your career is a journey around trying things, falling over, getting back up again, finding where you really feel energized about things. And so I, at that time, it felt kind of quite a big deal, but I felt pretty good about it as well because I kind of knew it wasn't right for me. And that ability to listen to yourself and understand where is your energy? What is it that makes you happy? What is it that kind of really brings you to life? If you can kind of stay in touch with that through your career, that's powerful, I think.
Yeah.
And you've got to live your journey and not what dad says and all the rest of it. It's about staying true to this sense of what energizes me. Yeah.
We've had a few lecturers on here that say that they think it's a good idea to not immediately jump into higher education after you turn 18, and to take maybe a few years to travel. Is that what you did, or did you take a few gap years? Did you go straight into higher education?
I was pretty linear, apart from the fact that I've changed directions a couple of times, in that I didn't, right? And, kind of 18 and I went to, did my 3 years in university, and then I went into, the milk round as it's called in the UK, and then I got a job at a big company. And I remember clearly my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, saying to me, we were walking around London one lunchtime, she said, why don't we just go traveling? And I said, oh, I can't, my career. And I feel such an idiot now for even saying that. I can hear myself saying it because, I really think it'd be, I would really wish I'd done that now. My own eldest son has spent 3 months in Thailand this year learning how to do kickboxing, and he's going out to Japan in 2 weeks. He's living rent-free with me still, but, he's really exploring, and he's not kind of following kind of the path well trodden. And I think that's amazing. And I would encourage people to try different things. It's a long journey, right? And, we're now in a situation where, please God, people are healthy and medicine's improving. People will be living to beyond 100. People won't be retiring at 65. They'll be continuing their career. So it's a long journey. So go and travel, do fun things, find out about yourself, The businessman in me saying, I hope they come and do a degree with us first, though. But definitely go and travel, go and do things, find out about yourself. That's amazing. I wish I'd done it more.
Yeah, and you've traveled to so many places with your career.
Yeah, a bit.
Has that transition ever been difficult? Have you ever felt like you're having to leave things behind or start over?
No, not really. I mean, most of my travel, if I'm fair, has been, I've been, in Ireland or in London, and I've gone somewhere for a week or 2 weeks. When at the back end of my 20s, before I came to Ireland, I was working at IBM, and I lived in Turkey for a couple of years, really. And you'd be there for 3 weeks, come home for a long weekend with a couple of clients where, 18 months, 2 years I was there. So that was a bit difficult. I was getting married. And my wife now was pretty clear. We were moving to Ireland, and I didn't want to be traveling and about to get married and buy our first home. But no, I mean, I suppose I'm from the UK, so I came here and it was a transition in my life. This totally feels like home now and has done forever and always will be. But what we've not done is kind of uprooted off family and gone abroad for 3 or 4 years. And honestly, it's back to what I just said to you about if guys are thinking about traveling now, I wish we had done that. Maybe I will do that still at some point. Travel is amazing, and working with different cultures and, working with teams on the other side of the world sometimes. It's eye-opening. It's incredibly invigorating. It's really enriching. So I would encourage people to do that as much as they can.
You've always had a really, not linear career, but not far away from a linear career.
Yeah.
And you've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. How did you kind of find space to keep working, but also set something up in the background?
Yeah. So my entrepreneurial journey, for want of a better term, was somewhat expedient. That when I left, Rabo Direct, which was, what are we now? 6-7 years ago. I had, we'd grown the business to a substantial business, and we had to go through a pretty significant transformation, and we looked to sell the business, and I'd been managing that process for a couple of years, and ultimately we closed the business and worked with the team to do that, and that involved people becoming redundant, and we had an amazing team there, and we were very clear and transparent about that, but it was a hard job for a couple of years, and so I decided I didn't want to go back into traditional. I didn't want to go and work in another bank. And a number of people had asked me would I help them out, and so I considered doing a little bit of consulting work, see what happened, and I just went with that, and I ended up doing it for about 5 years, and through COVID, and it still worked, and a few ups and downs in that, but it was actually quite successful, and it worked out well. So it was entrepreneurial in the sense that I was taking risks of stepping outside a typical get paid on the 15th day of the month. But I've also done a lot of work with entrepreneurs as a coach and mentor. And I have to be honest with myself. I don't think a pure dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur, whatever that looks like. It requires a level of risk tolerance and ability to put things on the line that I was already at a stage in my life with 4 kids and a mortgage that was difficult. But even, am I that person anyway? I don't know. What does an entrepreneur really look like? Someone who's really prepared to put everything on the line, like some people do. And I have massive respect for when I see real, genuine entrepreneurs who are energized by it. And I'd love to see us moving here to support more people to explore that and see if that's something that's right for them. Because the world won't continue to move forward without people taking risks with ideas and really venturing. So I'd like to see how we can support that here. I'm still hugely enthused by the possibility of entrepreneurialism and supporting people. And it might be in my future again, at some point in my journey 10 years from now. But being an entrepreneur is a challenge as well. And people have to be open-eyed going into that, as well as a lot of excitement.
And how did you experience the transition from the corporate setting to the entrepreneurial setting?
Yeah.
Was it at all scary? Were you? Did you have long periods of not knowing what to do and just waiting for things to happen?
Well, I was doing consulting work, so it was all about kind of getting projects and to kind of drive some income opportunities. But I was also exploring some other things myself around how I might develop, not just a consulting business, but develop a business. And I was interested in the area of education. I was very interested in the area of how I might work to support kind of people who were mid-career, who wanted to change and help them transition through that change. I became a qualified coach and did a lot of work with people around that. So, it was scary. There's no getting away from it when you've got 4 kids and a mortgage to pay. There's these 3 a.m. moments where you suddenly wake up and sometimes go, oh, what am I doing? But then there's the other side of it, which is there's a freedom, there's a sense of, it's on me. There's a sense of, master of your own destiny, which is amazing as well. And so it's a balance thing. Some people couldn't work in an organization, and I meet quite a lot of people like that. They could never manage the confines and boundaries that an organization puts on you. They have to work for themselves and be an entrepreneur. I'm kind of in between, I think. I really like being in an organization because of team and people. But I like the entrepreneurial part as well in terms of mastering my own destiny and some freedom.
You kind of spoke, and it was actually a question I had loaded, but how do you think people who don't fit or who don't want to fit into the corporate world go about being an entrepreneur? Because I do see it quite a lot, even in students here. I can tell some people they like projects, they like their own thing, they like, but they don't really fit the corporate world. I think I'm about that myself personally, but I think I'm a little bit on the fence.
Yeah.
But how would you say to go about that?
Well, there's a couple of things I'm thinking with that. One is that there's a stage in your life where why not, right? Because you're an early stage and your commitments are lower and you can afford to take some risks, so why not do that, right? It's a lot of fun. And, it's part of that adventure that we talked about. And career is adventure. It should be fun. It should be something that fills you with joy and pleasure. It shouldn't just be about paying the bills and getting to the end of the month. And when you lose sight of that, it gets sad. And I'm sure I've had that parts of my career. But, at an early stage, take the adventure, try it out. Why not? Risks are low. I think the other way of thinking about it is there's different times in your life where you'll get opportunities again to do it. There's nothing wrong if you want to go and work for a company, because that's going to give you some training and development and support. You have plenty of opportunities in the future. Those opportunities might be because you made redundant one day, or you decide that actually, you've come into some money and you want to go and try something else, or you just want to take a risk, because organizational life's not for you. It's not linear. People will have a job, be an entrepreneur, go and do some more education, do some teaching, go back into a job, try entrepreneurialism again. That's that sense of adventure, and the fact that, there are lots of different things that are going to come, and being open to opportunities, constantly open to the possibility of new things, so.
I think as well, I'm speculating because obviously I'm quite young in my career, but I think the sense of adventure is really important, especially to take on something like entrepreneur. I think it helps you understand things a lot more. So if you were to take on an entrepreneurial adventure and come back into a regular job, you'd understand business a little bit more, and I know it kind of help you in your job a little more. So I think
so, yeah.
Even if it doesn't work out, it's worth getting the perspective of it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about learning, isn't it? And there's a remarkable sense of accountability when you're walking across the bridge and you're on your own, trying to start something. Now, it all starts with someone taking a chance. Maybe they do it with a friend in partnership, but they've got to walk across a bridge, and it's uncertain, and it's accountable, and it's on them. And there is something very singular about that focuses everything, right? And you have to admire people who do that. It's amazing. Like, the world wouldn't move forward if people weren't prepared to do those things and take risks. We wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't have this building around us. Nothing would be created if people hadn't taken risks and had a vision. So whatever we can do to support that, we should. Yeah. And it's part of learning. It's part of the journey. It's part of the excitement.
And when you launched yourself into entrepreneurship, how much insurance did you have before going into it? Because I know, like, Conor Murphy said that he traveled, but he found the job before, and he knew he was going there with a purpose, as opposed to Barnaby Taylor would just go there and figure it out over there.
There you go.
I feel like those two perspectives are very different.
Yeah, two different guys, two different perspectives. I listened to some of their podcasts, actually. I don't know if you can ever fully have insurance, really, right? And you can think of insurance in different ways. Insurance could be you've got an amount of money in the bank. So people talk about having a runway, and do they have their mortgage covered for 6 months while they're starting off, and to look after their family. So there's part that. I think there's other ways of thinking about insurance, like your network. If you've got a very strong network, that can give you some confidence when you're starting out, because that can create opportunity for you. And we probably don't talk about that enough, but that early investment in a network, like, the work you're doing here is to, advance yourself in terms of getting a degree. But the work you're really doing as well is you're building your network, you're building your connectivity to people, and that will pay you back through your life. My network from when I did my MBA is still very important to me from a friendship point of view, but also opportunity point of view. People I've worked with before, that's a form of insurance as well, So I'd be encouraging, every time I speak to students here, when I was doing coaching, really encouraging people to put a focus on that. You're the value of your relationships, right? Yeah. And doing that in a way that's kind of, dignity and honorable, because you like people, and building those relationships. It's very valuable to you in terms of the friendship you get, but also to your future, creating options for you.
I think it's really important as well. There's going to be a lot of young people going into the working world. And mentors are a thing I've heard quite a lot. Like, a lot of people mention it. Is there any mentors who kind of stand out for you, or do you have any advice on what you should do to maybe people who are a little bit older who may be watching and see young people come through? Yeah.
There's a few parts to this, I think. I've been lucky to have some people that I've worked for that have taken a real interest, and either their enthusiasm and curiosity has rubbed off on me. There was a guy I worked for early when I worked in banking, and it was just like play. And I remember on my interview with him, he pretended to be the CEO and put a different kind of accent on to kind of I suppose play through like a case study, and it was so much fun. And from people like that, what did learned about this is meant to be fun as well. It's serious, but it has to be fun. You have to enjoy it. And then I've been lucky enough to have people who've taken an interest in my development and supported me at, you know, particular junctures, and really invested time in making sure I got opportunities to develop. And, you know, that's been really important to me as well. So I think there's a couple of dimensions here. You know, I think the responsibility on managers and leaders to act as mentors. And we're looking at that in DBS actually, around how we can support mentoring over the next kind of few years, because it can be a massive impact for people, for our team, for staff, around accelerating. But also we need to look at it for students as well. But leaders and people who are lucky enough to got, you know, further into the careers and have had all these experiences, and people like myself and Barney and Connor, you know, it's almost incumbent upon us to kind of find ways to give some of that back as well, because we've benefited along the way. So I really would encourage everyone to kind of take opportunities to mentor, because it's really enriching. And actually, I had a conversation with someone this week, you know, you get this idea of reverse mentoring as well. So when you're working with people, you know, from different generation, maybe you're learning as well, so that's wonderful. And then I would say that go after searching for a mentor. You know, make that a thing that you look for. If you feel there's someone you trust and you know, they could act as a confidant, and someone who can support you because of the experience they have, search that out. And people, if you go looking for it and you ask, I think most people would be more than delighted to
So do you think a lot of young people who now graduate or gone on into the working world, into the corporate world, they should look for a mentor maybe as soon as possible and let them guide your hand a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, because, you know, it's all about learning, isn't it? And if you can get up your learning curve a little bit faster because someone like me has fallen over and made some mistakes and can share some of that journey with you, then that's a good thing. And I remember, it is coming to mind, a conversation I had with someone years ago, and I said to a guy I was working with, he was a guy a good bit older than me, I said, you know, what do you think distinguishes those that are very successful from those that don't quite achieve success? And he said something that stayed with me, and I think it's very, very true. And it's the ability to learn at speed. Yeah. And, you know, you see some people and they seem to be making the same mistakes, right? And then you see some people, they're trying different things, they fall over, they learn very quickly, they move on. And they constantly seem to have this ability to learn and move. And mentoring, and receiving mentoring support is a way of accelerating that learning, it can be, because you're not just got your journey, you're able to really get the benefit of other people's experience. Yeah. So I think it's a very powerful thing. Okay. So go look for it.
I think we've been quite lucky. We've had a lot of DBS people who put their arm around us and given us a little bit of help. Yeah, that's
great. So that's lovely to hear.
We're quite lucky. But I think another thing to probably factor in for students who are leaving, they don't know what they want to do is, or if they have a job and they have multiple offers, I think community is a really big thing. Like, I think community really helps me be passionate about what I'm doing or not doing. If I'm doing something just because someone tells me it's a task on a task list, it's a little bit harder. Yeah. But when I know it's going to improve the community around me, it makes it much easier to do. So would you say when selecting a job, asking a lot of questions about the culture and the community is a really big question to ask? Because I think a lot of students just want the job and they don't really ask those questions.
Of course, yeah. And it's a difficult thing to learn from a question in an interview, right? You know, because no one's going to say, you know, of course we have a problem with our culture. So you've got to be smart and do your homework. And there's quite a lot of ways of doing that these days. Like the level of transparency around companies, you know, there's platforms where people will tell you how they feel anonymously about working somewhere, right? It's very hard to be disingenuous and bullshit people these days. You know, there has to be a level of authenticity about your culture. You can have problems that you work on, but, you know, and particularly working kind of with younger people these days, they will not accept anything other than the right intentions. You know, no one's perfect, and we're on a journey here, right? But, you know, I think people need to know that myself and the senior team, our intentions are around how to support and develop people in the team. So do your homework and go and ask questions so you can really find out if there's some authenticity here, you know, and where you started in terms of your view on the culture here. You know, I think, you know, and the importance of community. I mean, one of the things I have found that I've really loved is watching the community here and watching you guys and the work you do with students, to be honest, is really inspiring, you know, and it's a real strength for us as an educational institution, you know, as a school. It's just wonderful to see, and it really creates value for people. And so, well done. It's great.
Thank you. That's really kind. I'm also really curious, as you grow, as you get older and you take on more accountability, more responsibility, it comes with a little bit more expectation. How do you kind of manage those expectations? Because I'm sure it's quite hard coming in as the president, and people want to talk to you. Everyone wants to know your name. Everyone wants a favor or
sometimes they don't want to talk to me. They just walk by.
We do.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because when people ask me, you do have to be honest with people and say, in fairness, as you progress through your career and you take on more responsibility, that comes sometimes with, a price to pay. I think you've got to work out if it's the right price to pay for you personally. But of course, the expectations are higher, and you're responsible for the performance of a business, and you have to stand over that. You're accountable, and you have to be comfortable taking that on. And so you've got to ask yourself that question, right? And for me, coming back into a leadership position in an organization, a big part of it was wanting to take on that accountability and responsibility. And I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, I enjoy that. And it's a bit like being the head of a family, I'm not the head of a family, actually. Probably my wife is, in fairness. But you get my point. You're a parent, and, it's that... There's some of the same feeling, yeah? You want to develop and nurture, and that's where my drive comes from. I inherited a fantastic team. I took over from a guy who'd done a brilliant job here, but I wanted to I want to work while I'm doing this job to leave it in a better place, to bring some of myself to it. And that's my motivation. And that's about people, the team, the culture, the community. It's not all on me. It's making sure that we've got the right people in the business and the team, and that I can enable them. And my best thing I can do sometimes is just stand out the way and let the magic happen, which I see. It's not all on me, but I do want to try and create an environment where we can achieve success as a business, as part of Kaplan, that people feel very strongly about being part of this team and motivated, that our students have a good experience, that, we position this as a place that's going to be sustainable and successful into the longer term. So after I'm gone, that it's, good play. You want to hand it over as something that's really, really, strong. So that's my motivation. That's where it comes from. It's about, and I love that. I really do. And that's back to, you've got to ask yourself the question around, is that what you want? Is that what you want to, is that the responsibility you want? And there's things that come with responsibility, but there's a lot of joy as well that comes with it. And you've got to be up for it. Yeah, you've got to want to do that. You've got to want to bring yourself to it, and you've got to have the energy for it. And it's got to feel authentically like something that's important to you as well as balanced with all your other responsibilities in life and family.
I was just going to ask then, how do you find that balance while having so many responsibilities and working so hard? And I'd imagine if you take a sick day, everything explodes and everyone dies.
No, I don't want to overstate that, because there's a brilliant team here, and I'm really lucky, and we've done some work to bring some other people into the team, and we have a fantastic team. And I could have a sick week and the place will run just fine. I don't have any concerns about that whatsoever. We're a wonderful team. So, and it's not my job that the place, I'd be very bad at my job if the place fell over if I was out for a day, and it's not going to, because there's plenty of smarter people than me to solve those problems. My job is to create an environment where, we have clarity around what it is that we want to do, that the team feel like this is something they want to put their energy into and get behind. And then I've done a good job, and then, then the place will have momentum in itself. So it's not about me, we've got a lot of brilliant people here. It's about creating an environment where other people can kind of thrive and great things can happen, and I think we're on that journey, which is cool. And
has finding that balance then between your personal life and the work life, has that been difficult at all?
At times, yeah, particularly like, when your kids are at certain stages, I definitely feel like, you know, because what am I, 20, 18, 17 and 14, they're kind of getting quite independent, right? So it actually feels like there's a bit more time and space for me to really throw myself into my work and career again. And maybe there was a time, look, it's still running around and taking people to football and doing all that stuff, which I love. But I've got a bit more time at this point in my life. But there's times in your life where you're challenged because you've got very young kids or, really young, or something goes wrong, or there's a problem with family, or and I think that can be difficult, and I've definitely experienced some of that, you know. But generally, you know, if I'm enjoying my work and my career, I think that energy kind of spills over into my personal life as well, and people will know. My family will know if I'm feeling happy and really engaged and energized by what I do. It really rubs off at home as well, I think, you know. So I'm a nicer dad.
If you have a long weekend, I think our students, we get them all the time, where it seems like there's a mountain in front of us. How do you unwind and release the tension and relax a little bit? It's easier said than done, I feel like, sometimes.
Yeah, and you know, and this business is a bit like other business I worked in, because we've got an international dimension as well. You do have to have an ability to be able to switch in and out a little bit, you know. So, and I'm okay with that, I think, you know. So I when I came here, I realized that I was working quite hard, and I was sending emails, and sometimes, you know, late or early or something. And so I put at the end of my email, look, this is me, and I'm sometimes need to be flexible, but please do not feel that you have to respond if they're getting a crazy email at, 8 o'clock on a Saturday night or something, you know. So I'm pretty comfortable around that. I need to flex at times, and it'll work both ways. But there is, you know, times it can be busy, and we'll have things on, and we're part of an international organization, and we need to get things ready for a big presentation with the global CEO or something. So at times you have to, you know, you'll eat into a bit of your personal time, but I'm fine with that. And in terms of, you know, unwinding, you know, it's always crazy at home with 4 teenagers and stuff. So there's plenty to think about to take my mind off it. And I do play a bit of golf, and have 2 dogs, which I love walking, and I've got friends, and I've not had a drink since Christmas, but like normally I like to go for a pint, you know. So yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong then, but it seems like you tend to focus more on one objective, like instead of juggling multiple. Like as an example, Barnaby would be working on 8 different projects simultaneously, and we had a whole conversation about how he balances that. But is that something you do as well, or do you tend to focus?
I think
on
you have to. You know, you try and keep a focus on what's at hand, but you know, inevitably, you know, like I've got 6, 7 plus people that work directly with me, and you know, from an HR point of view and a commercial point of view and operations and technology and all of the different parts of the business. And so you are always things going on. And that's the beauty of a job like this, to be honest. You know, you feel quite blessed that you get to touch all of those different things in some ways. And that is one of the things I love about my job. So you have to be able to spin plates. There are problems every day. And we're an interesting place because, you know, we've got 400 and something staff and best part of 10,000 students a year. So things happen, right? And so you've got to be able to respond to that. And so it's never boring. Oh my goodness, it's never boring. Yeah, there's all stuff going on. And you just have to be able to spin plates, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And you talked a lot about like long-term career management.
Yes.
What would be your best advice for people to future-proof or to stay sort of relevant in their career?
Yeah. And isn't that's of course difficult, right? And you have to be agile and keep moving and learning, I think. And you know, I think the problem that people can get into is if they think, you know, I've got a great degree, or I went to the best university, or I went here and I'm done now, and I was an accountant and now I'm set up for life. And, you know, because of course life changes and things shift, and you have to continue to evolve, and you have to invest in yourself, and you have to keep learning. And, you know, really part of the hypothesis around my job here is that as a business school, our job is to support people at the start of their career, but through their journey through their career in life, because they're going to have to continue to learn all the way. And so it's about curiosity and ability to learn and wanting to learn and energized to keep evolving. That is the thing that will allow you to sustain, I think. The moment you think you've got it cracked or you're going to run into the rocks, I think that's really, really important. And having the energy and enthusiasm and sense of fun around career as well. And opportunities will come. And, there's a lot of, fortune in that, isn't there? We have bad luck, we have good luck. You got to run with things and grab them when they come up. Like this job, which I'm enjoying so much, like I didn't plan for this. It's an opportunity that came up. I'm so thrilled. And I wasn't quite sure going back into a company, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm good days and bad days like anyone, but I'm so grateful that I took that opportunity because it's brilliant.
And I know you say opportunities come up, but I think sometimes you can create opportunities from opportunities. Like you shouldn't be afraid to take on random things and just see where it leads you. Sometimes it won't lead nowhere, but it's fun and it's interesting. And sometimes it might open up some doors.
Well, look at what you guys are doing. Look at sitting here and look at the skills you've got.
It's quite random because neither of us are film students. He's audio and I do project management. So look,
you have this now, right? And this will serve you in the future. You'll create opportunities for you. And there's something, isn't there, about being open to opportunity, When I think of my kids, are they grabbing things? And something happens at some point, you can see, and they become open to grabbing those opportunities. Well, at an earlier stage, they're like, no, that's not cool, or I'm not going to do that, or it's kind of narrow. Once you open up, things start to happen, don't they?
Do you ever find it hard to keep up with media? It's obviously it's evolving so quickly right now, and I'm sure it's not the time you've come from, but obviously you've had to learn with it. And I imagine it can be quite challenging.
So I mean, and my probably biggest thing is that I'm so curious about what's going on in the world, and I've got all these subscriptions. I'm always clipping things into my kind of digital reader, and I'll come back to it, and of course I never get through it all. And so, I need to manage that a little bit. So you can get overwhelmed, can't you? And I'm pretty careful about, and age plays a part of this, right? So
you're 25, right?
Yeah, around that. But I have TikTok on my phone because my daughter's put it on there and stuff. So I'm not going down that kind of rabbit hole.
That's the worst place ever.
So, but I engage with LinkedIn and stuff. I don't like Facebook, and it's really interesting, new media, isn't it? Because I remember when social media was a new thing, and it's always been there for you guys. But I remember feeling so excited about that, because it was about community and connection and stuff. But of course, we see a lot of negativity associated with it as well. And as a parent, I worry about that a lot. So I'm a bit kind of allergic to some new media, which enables me to step away. Thank goodness. But traditional digital media, I'm trying to keep up with everything that's going on in the world, and it can be overwhelming. And you have to be careful about that, I think. Because I can be as bad looking at my phone as my kids on TikTok, right?
And so what skills do you think would become essential in the next decade?
Gosh.
If you know any.
I think AI is one that's creeping up because it's getting everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, And I actually knew you'd ask me about AI, and I was thinking I should think kind of that through more. And,
it's
AI
a difficult one.
is kind of incredibly exciting. It's terrifying. You could get yourself into existential angst about the fact that it's going to take all jobs away from us, and oh my goodness, what does this mean to our future? So that's not very healthy, probably. So we probably need to keep an open mind. I think it's unbelievable. I use it a lot myself to help me in terms of thinking about strategy and planning things. It's wonderful. But for sure, we see hype cycles around technology, don't we? But this does feel quite profound, and it's going to have an effect on people's lives and the world of work and employment. So, and I've heard people say, kind of, you won't lose your job to AI, you'll lose your job to someone who understands AI better than you. So I think there is definitely something about becoming very familiar with, the emergence of AI, new tools, and how that's going to enable you to add value. I think that has to be, for a young person thinking about their career, they have to have some investment in time and understanding that. And how can that help them, and how can that, allow them to be even more authentic, even more valuable in the work that they do. But I think there's another thing, which is you've got to hold on to what it is that makes you human as well.
Yeah.
Because those are the things that are going to be difficult to displace. So, if I was earlier in my career, the benefit of hindsight, you talk about community, you talk about working together. Look at the work you guys are doing around the college and how you team. Those things are profoundly important for your future and your success. Your ability to work with and mobilize through people, and your insight to people and your empathy, and they're incredibly powerful. So, I think really people should be finding ways to get into that really difficult space as well of having to work through and with people, because as humans, that's how we really create value. And I think what we're going to see is that, a lot of knowledge is going to be distilled in a machine and accessible to us in real time. So that challenges us when we think about education. Do we need to do a 3-year course in something now because we can turn to a machine that can give us a lot of that? So it's, how do we use that information? How do we work with people to create value? I'd be thinking about things like that. So if we, if you look at, things like the World Economic Forum, they'll be talking about kind of the ability to think critically about information, being absolutely critical, and emotional and social intelligence. And how can you develop that, and how can you, mentoring and coaching comes into that as well, but your ability to work with people is a point of difference for people, I think.
I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people graduate. A lot of people graduate with degrees. A lot of people graduate with 2-1 or a first, and it'll be really common. And there are a number almost in the game of people graduating, and the thing that differentiates students right now is kind of the stuff they do outside of that classroom, outside of that, the projects they take on, the initiatives they do,
sports,
the campaigns,
working in teams.
And that's even though AI may be a thing, it's always going to be personality that kind of shines through a little bit more. So challenge yourself to do AI for sure, and learn that skill may be relevant, but also take on things that you get to show your personality.
And strong self-awareness, and that comes over time as well, like knowing yourself more. In fairness, you do. I think you get clearer on who you are and what really energizes you. But if you can get clarity on that early on in your career, it really help you, because you'll move towards areas that are going to energize you. Therefore, you're going to be more kind of motivated. You're going to be more committed. You're more likely to be successful. But AI, gosh, I'm
sure that's your biggest challenge for the next little while.
Well, for everyone, isn't it? And as an organization, we're certainly encouraged to think through, what does that mean in terms of the way we operate? What does that mean in terms of the teaching and learning experience? And that's going to evolve over the next number of years as well. We'll see a movement towards personalized learning. I think back to when I was a kid, that idea of one teacher, 20 kids in a classroom. It's so industrial, isn't it? That we all receive the same information and, style of teaching, but we've all got different needs. You may be way better than maths than I am. And so therefore I need more time and support. You move quicker, but I might be stronger on writing, and, my verbal skills, and maybe I can move quicker through that. Maybe we can work together, but our curriculum should enable us to move at the speeds that are relevant for us. So technology, I think, will really help that, around enabling people to build out a curriculum and a program that's personalized to their needs. And that's exciting.
This is a bit of an off piece, but I wanted to touch on this before we finish the podcast. Because you mentioned off camera that you lived in Turkey during the 1999 Istanbul earthquake. And I just wanted to know, how did that affect you as a person, and how did that affect your career?
It's also because you're born in the UK and you lived in Ireland a long time, so we don't get those. And people moving abroad, there's culture shocks all the time, and I imagine that really rocked you to your core.
I mean, living and working in Turkey for a couple of years was amazing, because the people are wonderful, beautiful people. They're fantastic fun, lovely. So that was amazing. It was just, I was fortunate, and I don't want to be glib about this, because, I was as a management consultant, and I actually, the day happened. It happened at a weekend when I was out there, and my sister was joining me for the weekend, so she was kind of around as well.
That was the worst timing ever.
Yeah, and we were in a kind of fairly posh hotel because we're management consultants, and over there, you know, those hotels are on rollers, and they're built to, you know, deal with this eventuality because it's on a fault line. But you know, at the edges of Istanbul, there was problems in that, you know, the property was built, you know, the regulations, you know, where people who were poorer, and, you know, those buildings collapsed and people died. There was 20,000 people that died in the region. So it was shocking. You know, it was unbelievable. And it was enough that even in that fancy hotel, you were kind of thrown out your bed, but it was fine. That was fine. It was gone in, you know, a few minutes. You went downstairs, it was like a fire test, and everyone was outside, everyone was safe. But then we realized that people around the country had really been devastated by that. So that was awful. And, you know, the realization that, you know, we live in Ireland, we live in the UK, it's pretty mild and straightforward, and, you know, your risks are low, and it might be a bit of rain and stuff, but, you know, it's quite straightforward, and people live very different lives not too far away. The weird thing about that was we stayed out there for another few weeks, and after an earthquake, you get lots of mini tremors. It's very common. And
Really?
there were, every day, there would be happening 3 or 4 times a day, that there'd be a small earthquake, and you'd be at a desk working, and it'd start to shake, and then it would come down again. Your nervous anxiety when that happens, like, is this going to be a big one again?
Would you say that was your biggest culture shock?
Biggest culture shock. Well, I think it was just more a shock having lived through something like that, you know. And
did a lot of people pass away on that earthquake?
No one I knew, in fairness, you know. But, you know, I was working in Istanbul, and people in Istanbul definitely passed away, where buildings, you know, crashed down. And in the wider region more, the epicenter was, I think, kind of 70 or 80 miles away, you know. I mean, yeah, it's very real, you know, understanding that people live in parts of the world where those kinds of, and of course, these days with climate change, we're seeing more and more of those kinds of things. So, yeah, it was a strange experience.
Okay.
And so, I mean, unless there's anything you want to touch on before we end,
No.
Is there anything you'd like to promote or say to anyone watching before we finish this? Anything you feel you want to talk about? Or
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of, you know, the conversation here is really kind of focused around career, and I think I share your view that it's not linear, and it's not straightforward, and it's not about the next job you get after graduating. It's about trying some different things, and maybe it is going traveling and learning more, and it is a time to have adventure and take some risks. But I think careers generally, I feel, should be a bit of an adventure, and your focus shifts through your career because in life you're moving on, and you might get married and have kids, and that shifts the dial in terms of what's important and your motivation and your ability to take some risks. But I just feel that I feel this so strongly today, even in my early 50s, as I did when I was starting out, that if it's not fun, if it's not an adventure, if you're not really enjoying yourself, it's so sad. And my kind of pet hate is I hate it when I see people who feel entrapped by an organization or their job, and they've lost all their agency, and they're fed up, and they're, you know, they don't like the boss, or they're not paid enough. And you want people to own their careers. Yep. It's an adventure. Take agency. You be in control. Invest in yourself. You move forward on your terms. And if I could say, if there was one thing I'd really love people to take on board, I think that's the way to be successful and happy, right? You know, it's got to be on your terms. And if that means working for the same company for 40 years, very unlikely these days, you know, perhaps our parents' generation or grandparents' generation did do that, then fine. There's no right or wrong answers. If it means having 10 jobs before you're 30, fine. Just keep learning. But don't move around every 6 months, you know, because when you look at someone's CV, right, you do wonder if they're spinning between companies. I love seeing a CV, though, if someone's been traveling and maybe they had their own business, and then maybe they went and worked for someone. They were involved in different things. They're rich experiences, and you can see they've run a podcast, or they're people who've prepared to go on the adventure and learn, and that's just a great sign, isn't it, that they're likely to be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely way to finish it. So for our last question, we have this tradition of every guest we have on leaves a question for the next one.
Yeah, wow.
And so last time we had on Keelan Lee, and she asked you, when are you at your happiest?
Yeah. Yeah, well, of course, I'm at my very happiest when I'm with my family and we're having fun and, that everyone's great and we're all in one space and my kids aren't killing each other and stuff. Yeah. And of course, they're my moments of joy, and with my extended family, of course they are. But, I am very happy when I'm working with a team where I feel aligned to I feel this strong sense of mission, and I feel this sense of kind of vision of where we're going and working together. That's really powerful. And when I think through my career, those are if I could stitch together a kind of thread of where I've really felt very, very happy, it's when that's felt right, where it's felt aligned for me personally, because there's a strong sense of alignment between what I feel is important, the business feels important, or I'm able to shape a vision and build a team around that. That's a great place to be.
Cool. That's really beautiful answer. And what would be your question then for the next guest?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And you can stitch them up. We've had a few.
Yeah.
No, I won't stitch.
We've had, what is the worst part of working at DBS?
Well, we've had the best and the worst. So they gave him two options.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be... you're going to be, I'm sure, kind of talking to quite a lot of people who are kind of like, a good way in their journey on their career. So, my question would be, what would be your advice to your 18 or 21-year-old self?